I teased him. You couldn't handle me. He leaned closer and said, "Want a bet?" The bar was alive with low jazz and quiet laughter. Joan moved behind the counter like she owned the place, confident, precise, every motion smooth from years of practice. The Edison glowed under soft amber lights, bottles lined in perfect rows behind her. She wore a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to her elbows, gold hoops catching the light each time she lifted a shaker. Across the bar, a man in a tailored charcoal suit watched her. He'd been there 20 minutes, nursing an old-fashioned, saying little. His friend's voice cut through the music, bragging about how rich men always know what women want. Joan didn't look up as she poured a drink. "Rich men," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut through the chatter. "They wouldn't know how to please a woman if she came with instructions." The room fell silent. The man's eyes met hers, ice blue steady, too calm. He leaned forward slightly and said one thing. "Want a bet?" For a second, neither moved. The air shifted, quiet but charged. Joan smiled, pretending it didn't shake her. She had no idea that one careless challenge was about to change everything. What happens when confidence meets obsession? Tell us in the comments where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe, because tomorrow we'll uncover another story you won't want to miss. Let's begin. Joan told herself it meant nothing. Just another night, another man trying to turn a challenge into conquest. She'd laughed about it with Keisha while closing out the register, but his words had followed her home like the echo of a song she couldn't shake. 3 nights later, he came back. Same seat, same drink, same stillness. She noticed him the moment he walked in, even before the door shut behind him. His suit was dark again, precise, his tie knotted with the kind of ease that spoke of habit, not vanity. He didn't call her over. He waited, eyes steady, as though time bent around his patience. By the 3rd visit, even the regulars whispered. "That's him again," Keisha muttered, loading the dishwasher. "You got a fan." Joan smirked, but her stomach tightened. She'd dealt with persistence before, but his silence unsettled her more than any flirtation could. When she finally approached, he met her with that same quiet confidence. "The old-fashioned?" she asked. "Yes," he said. Just like before. Nothing in his tone hinted at anything more, yet the way he said it made her pulse quicken. He didn't speak much that night either. When the crowd thinned, he stood, placed a folded bill on the counter, and left without a word. Only after he was gone did she notice the envelope under the glass, crisp white with her name written in a clean, deliberate hand. Inside was a business card embossed in silver. Daniel Harrington, CEO, Harrington Group Holdings. A handwritten note in blue ink rested beneath it. "Dinner. Let me prove you wrong." Joan froze. Keisha leaned over her shoulder, eyes wide. "Girl, that's Daniel Harrington? The one who built that glass tower on Lakeshore?" Joan didn't answer. She'd heard the name before, seen it in headlines about record-breaking deals, charity galas, and the kind of money that didn't breathe the same air as people like her. She slipped the note into her apron pocket and finished her shift, but her thoughts refused to settle. In her apartment that night, the city lights painted the ceiling in thin lines of gold. Curiosity got the better of her. She searched his name online, Forbes features, business awards, photos beside senators and CEOs. His world looked polished, untouchable. The next day, Keisha confronted her at the staff lockers. "Don't even think about it. You know men like that. They play nice till they get what they want." Joan shut her locker quietly. "It's just dinner. I want to see if he actually believes he can prove me wrong." "You sure it's not curiosity?" Joan smiled, tired. "Curiosity's all it is." She texted the number on the card. "One dinner. My rules." His reply came within minutes. "Tomorrow. 8. The Langham." The next evening, she almost canceled. Her reflection in the mirror felt foreign. Black silk dress, gold hoops smaller than her usual ones, lipstick the color of red wine. She reminded herself, this isn't a date. It's a test. When she arrived, the restaurant staff greeted her by name before she even spoke. Daniel was already seated, no tie this time, sleeves rolled to his forearms. The city shimmered behind him through floor-to-ceiling windows. "You came," he said, standing as she approached. "I said one dinner," she replied, slipping into the seat opposite him. His gaze held hers for a beat longer than was polite. "That's all I need." Their conversation started light. Business, the bar, how she learned to mix drinks by watching her uncle's hands. He listened closely, never interrupting, which unsettled her more than arrogance would have. Between courses, he asked, "Do you always challenge men that way?" "Only when they mistake confidence for currency," she said. His smile flickered, amused, intrigued. "And what do you think money buys?" "Access," she said, "not depth." For the first time, his expression shifted, as if her words had cut through something carefully held. By dessert, the silence between them felt different, charged but uncertain. She wasn't sure whether to call it attraction or danger. When he reached for the check, she stopped him. "I said my rules," she reminded. He paused, then let her take it. "Fair enough," he said softly. "But next time my turn." She left before he could walk her out. In the elevator, her hands trembled. She told herself it was just adrenaline. Yet as the doors closed, she caught a final glimpse of him standing at the table, watching her leave like a man who'd found something he hadn't known he was searching for. What Joan couldn't see was the way Daniel lingered long after she'd gone, untouched glass of wine before him, already certain of one thing. She wasn't just another curiosity. She was the first person who'd made him feel human in years. He wasn't going to let that go. The invitation came 2 days later. A black envelope delivered by courier, sealed with his initials in silver. Inside was a single card. Tonight. 7. Dress warm. No address, just a driver's number. Joan hesitated for hours before agreeing. She told herself it was curiosity again, that she just wanted to see how far this man would go to prove a point. When the car arrived, sleek and silent, she almost turned back. But she climbed in, crossing her legs, watching the city roll by in streaks of white and gold. The elevator doors opened to a private rooftop overlooking Millennium Park. String lights traced the edges of a glass railing, the skyline glittering beyond like scattered diamonds. A small table sat beneath a heater, 2 plates, 1 bottle of wine, soft jazz slipping through hidden speakers. He stood waiting, hands in his pockets. "You're right on time," he said. "I didn't know you owned the sky," she replied. He smiled faintly. "Rented it for the evening." For a while, she played along, accepting the poured wine, nodding as he described the chef, the imported grapes, the view. But by the time the main course arrived, her patience thinned. She leaned back, eyes steady on him. "You think money is a personality trait," she said. His fork paused midair. "What?" "You keep showing me what you can buy, not who you are." The words hit harder than she expected. The air cooled between them. He set the fork down slowly, his composure cracking just enough to reveal something unguarded beneath it. He looked at her, voice quieter. "I don't know how to do this." Joan blinked. "Do what?" "This. Dates. Real ones. It's been years since someone sat across from me who wasn't after a deal, a job, or a photo." He rubbed the back of his neck, a rare gesture of unease. "I thought this was what people did." The honesty caught her off guard. For the first time, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man trying to learn a forgotten language. "Okay," she said after a moment. "What do you want to do?" He looked confused. "I brought you here." "Yeah," she interrupted gently. "But you brought me into your world. What if we went into mine?" That's how they ended up in Bronzeville 2 hours later. The rooftop had felt sterile. This place breathed. The small blues club was tucked between an old bakery and a record shop, the kind of place where the bartender knew your drink before you ordered it. The walls glowed with the soft light of neon signs, and the sound of muddy waters rolled through the room like slow thunder. Joan led the way through the narrow space, greeting the band with a nod before sliding into a booth. Daniel followed, clearly out of place but trying not to show it. "Whiskey okay?" she asked. He nodded, watching her pour from the small table bottle. "You come here often?" "When I need to breathe," she said. After work, after customers who think I'm furniture. He listened, not with polite smiles, but with real focus. When she spoke about bartending through community college, his attention never wavered. She told him about her mother, how she used to clean houses in Kenilworth and Winnetka, how Joan would help polish the floors, looking at those perfect rooms and wondering who felt safe enough to live like that. He asked questions, not the kind that filled silence, but the kind that made her think. What would you do if you didn't have to bartend anymore? She laughed, a small, self-conscious sound. Open my own place. Not fancy, just honest. Good drinks, real music, no pretense. He nodded slowly. You'd make it work. What makes you so sure? Because when you talk about it, he said, you sound alive. It was his turn next. He spoke about inheriting a construction company buried in debt, the long nights spent fighting to rebuild it, the way success became a habit he couldn't stop chasing. He spoke quietly about losing friends, about trust shrinking to a few business partners and an assistant. I built everything to protect myself, he said. Turns out, I don't remember what I was protecting. For a moment, neither spoke. The music filled the space where words would have been. When they finally left, the night air was cold enough to sting. The city hummed around them, car horns, distant laughter, the rhythm of trains in the dark. Joan wrapped her coat tighter, ready to call it a night. But he stepped closer, hesitating just long enough for her to sense it coming. She didn't move. His hand brushed her cheek, tentative, as though seeking permission. Her breath caught. The kiss that followed wasn't planned. It was a collision. Desperate, hungry, alive. The kind of kiss that didn't ask, it consumed. When they pulled apart, she stared at him, stunned by the heat of it. He looked just as shaken. Neither spoke. The city noise faded to a dull hum as she turned away first. I should go, she whispered. He didn't stop her. Just watched her walk toward the waiting cab, his expression unreadable. In the car, Joan pressed her fingers to her lips. Her heart was racing, her mind refusing to quiet. She told herself it was a mistake, something that shouldn't have happened. But as the cab pulled away, she knew the truth. You can't taste something that's consuming and pretend it meant nothing. She had crossed a line, and there was no easy way back. Weeks passed, yet the line Joan had tried to draw kept blurring. Daniel showed up after her late shifts, always waiting quietly at the far end of the bar until closing. Some nights he brought takeout from places that didn't even offer it, Michelin-starred restaurants that seemed far too polished for someone still in her work apron. Other nights, he'd simply walk her to her car, saying little, eyes steady in a way that made her pulse race. She told herself it was temporary, an attraction that would fade once the novelty wore off. But it didn't fade. It deepened. Soon she was spending nights in his penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan. The first time she saw it, she felt small, surrounded by floor-to-ceiling glass that reflected the city's endless lights. She teased him about the minimalist decor, too perfect, too impersonal. He just smiled. I like order, he said. In that spotless kitchen, she showed him how to mix a proper cocktail. You shake too stiff, she teased, correcting his grip. He leaned closer, his breath near her ear. Teach me, he murmured. The lesson turned into something else entirely. Their connection burned fast, fierce, and unpredictable. He was possessive, almost protective in ways that both comforted and alarmed her. He wanted to know where she was, if she was safe, who she was with. His intensity could be suffocating, but when he touched her, all the reasons she should run dissolved into heat and want. One night, after a long dinner, he asked her to come with him somewhere. She followed him through quiet city streets to the Art Institute, closed and dark. Yet the guard at the door greeted Daniel by name. Inside, the museum was silent except for the echo of their footsteps. He led her to a single painting, Edward Hopper's Nighthawks. They stood before it for a long time. I've always felt like that, he said quietly. Everyone can see you, but no one really does. She looked at him, and for the first time, saw the weight he carried, the kind that comes with power and loneliness intertwined. She reached for his hand without thinking. The moment was tender, almost fragile, but things shifted afterward. Subtle changes that she couldn't quite explain. His driver seemed to know her schedule. Her landlord, who had ignored maintenance requests for months, suddenly replaced her broken heater and repainted the hallway. A regular who once cornered her at work stopped showing up entirely. At first, Joan brushed it off. Coincidences, maybe. Until she overheard one of Daniel's assistants mention a list of concerns he'd taken care of for her. That night, she went to his penthouse furious. "Did you tell my landlord to fix my apartment?" He looked up from his laptop, calm as always. "It needed attention." "Did you have that customer banned from every Harrington property?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "He made you uncomfortable." "That's not your call," she snapped. He stood, his tone tightening. "You were being harassed. I have the ability to stop it. Why wouldn't I?" "Because it's my life," she shouted. "You don't get to control it just because you care." His composure cracked. "I'm not controlling you. I'm protecting you." "No, you're not," she said, voice shaking. "You're trying to make me fit into your world where everything and everyone moves because you say so." He stared at her for a long moment, jaw clenched. "Maybe I don't know how to stop," he said finally, his voice raw. "I've spent 10 years fixing problems before they can touch me. You're the first thing I don't want to lose." The silence that followed was heavy. Joan's anger softened, but fear lingered under it. He wasn't threatening. He was terrified, desperate to control the uncontrollable. When he reached for her, she didn't resist. The fight turned into something physical, fierce, and wordless. The walls that separated love from need crumbled fast, leaving them tangled in a mix of anger, relief, and desire. Afterward, she lay against his chest, the sound of his heartbeat steady under her ear. He brushed her shoulder lightly, his voice quiet. "I don't know what you're doing to me." She wanted to tell him she didn't either. That she was scared of him, of herself, of how much she wanted this. Instead, she said nothing. Days blurred. They existed in their own rhythm, his world of privilege brushing against hers in quiet collisions. He dropped by the Edison late at night, always tipping generously, never asking for special treatment. She'd visit his penthouse, bringing pieces of her life with her, music, laughter, stories from her shifts. Still, something in her began to ache. The more he gave, the more she felt herself disappearing into his orbit. When she confided in Keisha, her best friend didn't mince words. "Girl, men like that don't change. They make you think you're special until you're not." Joan didn't argue, but her silence was an answer of its own. She wanted to believe she was different, that what she had with Daniel wasn't another version of the same old story, power disguised as love. Yet even as she stood at her bar one night, mixing drinks with her usual precision, her eyes kept drifting to the door, half expecting him to appear. The doubt never left. It whispered through every quiet moment. What if Keisha was right? What if this wasn't love, but a beautiful trap? Still, when her phone buzzed with his name, her heart betrayed her reason. She picked up. "Are you still mad?" he asked. "No," she said softly. "Just tired." "Then let me make it right." Joan hesitated, then whispered, "Okay." She wanted to believe this could be different. That maybe love wasn't about control or freedom, but learning how to hold both without losing yourself. Joan wanted to believe she was strong enough to handle him. But love built on power is never simple, and her heart was already too deep to climb out unscathed. For the first time in months, Joan felt like she could breathe. The chaos that had defined her relationship with Daniel began to quiet. He made real efforts, small but steady, to respect her boundaries. He didn't show up unannounced anymore. He stopped calling 3 times a day to check if she was safe. When she said she needed time alone, he gave it. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. She found herself thinking about him during slow shifts, smiling without realizing it. Even Keisha noticed. "You're softer," she teased. "Just don't lose your edge, girl." Joan laughed, but she understood the warning. Daniel surprised her by showing up to her bartending competition in the Loop, a regional mixology event she'd been preparing for all year. She didn't expect him to come, didn't even tell him the exact time. But when she stepped on stage, She saw him in the crowd, sitting in the front row, sleeves rolled, watching her with an intensity that didn't feel heavy this time. It felt proud. She was calm under pressure, her movements deliberate and graceful as she crafted her signature drink: bourbon, smoked honey, and orange bitters. The judges watched, impressed, but her focus was on Daniel. When they announced she'd taken second place, he was the first to stand and clap, grinning like she'd just won the world. Afterward, he met her backstage. "You were brilliant," he said, handing her a bouquet of wildflowers. "And before you ask, I didn't buy your first place." Joan laughed. "Good. I wouldn't have accepted it." He brushed his thumb over her cheek. "That's what I love about you." They celebrated quietly that weekend at his Lake Geneva estate, a sprawling modern home that should have felt intimidating, but somehow didn't. There were no staff, no business calls, no interruptions. Just them. They cooked together, burned the first batch of pancakes, and laughed until it hurt. They made love in front of the fireplace, surrounded by the sound of wind pressing against the glass. Later, they lay tangled under a blanket, talking until dawn about everything and nothing: family, ambition, fear, faith. For those 2 days, the world outside didn't exist. But Monday came, and reality followed. Daniel wanted her to meet someone important: his business partner, Victor Sloan. The dinner was at Gibson Steakhouse, all dark wood and muted chatter. Victor was polite, well-mannered, but his questions carried weight. "So, Joan," he said, smiling thinly, "what's it like dating one of Chicago's most eligible men?" She smiled back, matching his tone. "Exhausting, but occasionally worth it." Daniel laughed, proud, but she saw the calculation in Victor's eyes, the subtle assessment, the unspoken math of worth and cost. To him, she wasn't a woman. She was a variable in Daniel's life that needed managing. After dinner, in the car, she stayed quiet. Daniel reached for her hand. "Ignore Victor," he said softly. "He sees everything through contracts and profits." "I noticed," she replied. "But I'm not a merger, Daniel." "I know," he said. "You're the only part of my life that doesn't feel like business." His words warmed her, though a quiet unease settled beneath them. A week later, it was Daniel's turn to enter her world. Joan hosted Sunday dinner in her apartment, her aunt's recipe for baked chicken, greens, and mac and cheese filling the air. Keisha came early to help, teasing that the place had never looked so clean. When Daniel arrived, he looked slightly out of place in his designer sweater and polished boots, but his smile was genuine. Joan's aunt sized him up instantly. "You one of those men who talk more than they listen?" she asked, setting down a tray. Daniel didn't flinch. "I've been told that before," he said, "but I'm learning." Her aunt chuckled. "Good answer. Sit. Eat." Throughout dinner, Daniel didn't dominate the table. He asked questions about family, listened to stories, complimented the food like it was a 5-star meal. Keisha watched him closely but later whispered to Joan, "I'll give him this. He knows how to show respect." After everyone left, Joan and Daniel sat together on her worn couch, the plastic on her aunt's furniture still clinging to his sweater from earlier. He looked around her apartment, the small space, the family photos, the chipped coffee table, and said quietly, "This feels more like home than anything I own." Joan smiled, her heart caught between warmth and caution. Maybe that's the point. For a while, things felt balanced. Two worlds touching without colliding. She worked her shifts, planned her future, and saw Daniel without feeling consumed. He learned to meet her halfway. She let herself dream of what could be, a life where they both existed without one overpowering the other. There were nights she caught herself thinking, maybe this could last. Maybe love really could bridge the impossible. But perfect moments are fragile. They never announce when they're about to end. They just fade quietly, replaced by something colder. And though neither of them knew it yet, the real world was already waiting, patient and relentless, ready to test everything they'd built. For now, Joan allowed herself the illusion, because for the first time, it felt real enough to believe in. It started on a Tuesday morning, quiet, gray, unremarkable. Joan woke to her phone buzzing non-stop on the nightstand. Dozens of notifications, messages, missed calls. She rubbed her eyes, thinking it was some mistake, until she saw the first headline. Harrington's new flavor, billionaire slums it with Southside bartender. Her face stared back from the screen, frozen mid-laugh outside Gibson's, Daniel's arm around her shoulders. Another photo showed them walking through Millennium Park, his hand at her waist. The article was cruel, every line sharpened to cut. Words like gold digger, social climber, and charity project spilled across the page. They mentioned the Edison by name, quoted anonymous sources, and framed her as a woman who'd caught the city's most eligible bachelor through seduction and persistence. Her stomach dropped. Within an hour, the story had spread. Every local blog, every gossip column. Someone had gone out of their way to make her humiliation complete. By the time she reached the Edison, 2 reporters were waiting outside, microphones ready, cameras flashing as soon as she appeared. One shouted, "Joan, are you moving into the tower with him?" Another added, "Is it true he's paying your rent?" She pushed through the doors, shaking, heart pounding so hard she thought she might faint. Inside, her co-workers avoided her eyes. Her boss, Martin, gestured her into the office. "Joan," he began softly, "I think it's best if you take a few days off, just until this blows over." She stared at him. "I didn't do anything wrong." "I know," he said, sighing. "But the attention, it's bad for business. Customers are already calling, asking if it's true. You need space to let things cool down." The words landed like a slap. Space. Cool down. As if she were some scandal that needed managing. Joan walked out of the bar through the back alley to avoid the cameras. The cold air bit her skin, but it didn't clear the ache in her chest. For years, she'd built her reputation, professional, composed, respected. Now she was a headline. By noon, her phone was still buzzing. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. She hesitated, then answered. "Joan, I saw it," he said immediately. His voice was clipped, distracted. "I'm in New York, but I've already spoken to PR. We'll handle this." "Handle this?" Her tone cracked. "Daniel, this isn't a press issue. This is my life." "I know," he said. "I'll fix it. I promise." His choice of words felt like a knife twist. Fix it, as if she were a PR disaster, not a person bleeding on the other end of the line. "I have to go," she whispered. "Don't call me right now." She hung up before he could respond. Hours passed in a blur. She turned off her phone, shut the curtains, and sat on the floor of her small bathroom. The silence pressed in until it broke her. Tears came hard and fast, tearing through the walls she'd built around herself for years. Keisha found her like that after work, knees pulled to her chest, hands shaking. "I knew better," Joan choked out. "I knew better than this." Keisha knelt beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "No, girl. You didn't do anything wrong. You let yourself love someone. That's not a mistake." But Joan couldn't believe her. The internet had turned her into a caricature. People she'd served drinks to were sharing her name online like gossip was currency. When night fell, she ignored every buzz of her phone. Daniel called once, then twice, then 10 times. She didn't answer. By 11, headlights cut across her living room blinds. A knock followed, a steady rhythm on the door. "Joan." Daniel's voice carried through the wood, rougher than she'd ever heard it. "Please open the door. I came back early." She stood on the other side, hand on the lock, but she couldn't move. "Joan, talk to me," he pleaded. "We can get through this. I'll make it right." Her voice was quiet but firm. "You can't fix this with money or power. You can't fix what we are." "Then tell me how," he said, desperation edging his words. "Tell me what to do." "Go back to your world," she whispered. "Let me have mine back." There was silence, just his breathing on the other side. Then footsteps fading down the hall. Joan slid to the floor, pressing her back against the door. The tears came again, but softer this time, resigned. She thought that was the end of it, that if she walked away now, she could reclaim her life. But men who build empires don't accept defeat, and Daniel Harrington wasn't done. The story wasn't over. What Joan didn't yet understand was that letting go of Daniel wouldn't free her. It would only test how much of herself she was willing to lose to stay invisible again. 3 weeks passed. Joan returned to the Edison, her steps careful, her head high. The whispers didn't stop. The stares lingered. Every tip she poured, every drink she shook, felt like a small battle. Brick by brick, she rebuilt the walls she thought she had torn down with Daniel, learning to separate her worth from the gossip and the assumptions of strangers. Meanwhile, Daniel was nowhere near quiet. His life, once meticulously controlled, had shifted into overdrive. Deals accelerated, acquisitions stacked one on top of another. His business partner, Lawrence, noticed the change immediately. "You're taking risks," Lawrence said during a meeting, the tension in his voice sharp. "Burning bridges. You've gone too far." Daniel didn't slow. He threatened legal action against every outlet that published the article, sending letters, calls, and warnings to editors, ensuring every mention of Joan's name carried consequences. When Joan discovered it, she felt a mix of fury and betrayal. Not because the stories were being silenced, but because he had made the decision without her input. He assumed he could protect her, decide for her, without asking. Anger outweighed fear the afternoon she walked into Harrington Tower. The private elevator rose silently, whisking her to the penthouse. Daniel's assistant tried to stop her. "Mr. Harrington." Joan brushed past, her focus sharp. Daniel looked up from his desk, surprised, tense, and somewhere behind his composure, vulnerable. "I know what you've been doing," she said, voice steady but charged. "Threatening them all without even telling me." He ran a hand through his hair, not denying it. "I didn't want you to be hurt any more than you already were." "You want to save me like I'm some project," Joan said, her voice rising. "Like I'm something broken you can fix with your money and power." He leaned back, exhausted, raw. "I don't want to save you. I want you to save me. Because I was drowning in that world before you, and I'll drown again without you." Her chest tightened. For the first time, she saw past the billionaire to the man terrified, unsure, and lost in ways that mirrored her own insecurities. "You used investigators to research me before we even started dating," she said, the accusation hanging heavy. "I Googled your exes. I stalked their social media. You bought my apartment building. Every day, I've been afraid I'm not enough for your world." "I know," he admitted, "and I can't promise I'll stop being protective, but I can promise I'll try." Joan exhaled slowly, a tension she hadn't realized she carried releasing with it. "I need to know I'm choosing this," she said, "not being swept along by the current of your life." He nodded, silent, eyes fixed on her as if memorizing the boundaries she needed him to respect. She turned and left. This time, Daniel didn't follow. He didn't call after her, didn't chase her down the hall. He stayed at his desk, silent, stripped of power, exposed in the only way that mattered, without her choice, without control. Outside the elevator, Joan pressed her hand to the railing, the weight of the confrontation settling in her chest. Love, she realized, sometimes meant letting go. And sometimes it demanded the courage to fight, not for possession, but for clarity. For both of them, the decision would not be easy, and the consequences would echo far beyond this room. Joan spent the next 2 months reshaping her life. She left the Edison, trading the bustling Gold Coast bar for a smaller, quieter cocktail bar in Wicker Park. The pay was lower, the clientele less glamorous, but each shift reminded her she was in charge of her own story. She measured success by choice, not spectacle. Outside of work, Joan met with a business consultant to plan her own bar. Every number she crunched, every lease she considered, felt like a claim of independence. She relied solely on savings accumulated over years of bartending and careful budgeting. She refused to wonder if Daniel's money could have expedited her goals. This was hers, earned and earned alone. Keisha watched quietly, noting the subtle changes in her friend. Joan wasn't the same woman who had poured drinks for admirers at the Edison. She was someone who had learned how to be vulnerable and survive it. Every night, she returned home with a renewed sense of agency, her laughter returning, cautious but unguarded. Meanwhile, Daniel faced his own reckoning. The obsession with control and protection that had fueled his pursuit of Joan now endangered his business. Lawrence confronted him in a board meeting. Either focus or step down. The aggressive legal measures and media attacks had created enemies, and his single-minded pursuit was visible to all. After a tense pause, Daniel made a decision that shocked the room. He appointed a CEO to manage daily operations while he maintained ownership, but released the suffocating grip on every move. He began therapy, confronting decades of control issues rooted in a childhood filled with chaos and instability he had never processed. He also started volunteering at a youth mentorship program in Englewood. This time, it wasn't for optics or headlines. He remembered Joan's words about the children who needed tangible proof that success could look like them. Each session reminded him that influence wasn't just power, it was responsibility. In parallel, Joan's efforts started bearing fruit. 3 months after her last confrontation with Daniel, she found herself walking into a potential Pilsen storefront. The lighting was dim, the space rough, but the bones were perfect. The landlord mentioned the building had just been sold, but the new owner prioritized small businesses over luxury developments. Joan didn't ask who the buyer was, though deep down she already knew. Both were rebuilding independently, learning that wholeness had to come from themselves before they could hope to reconnect. The lingering question was no longer whether they still loved each other. It was whether they could create something lasting from the pieces of their past. Joan arrived at Promontory Point on a freezing November evening, the wind slicing across her jacket as she took in the waves crashing over the rocks. Lake Michigan was rough, the water whipped into whitecaps, and the Chicago skyline glowed against the dark horizon. She saw Daniel standing at the edge, hands in his coat pockets, watching the water. He turned, surprise breaking across his face. For the first time, he didn't assume he knew why she was there. "I found a space in Pilsen," Joan said, her voice firm against the wind. "I'm opening my bar there. This is the life I'm building." She pulled a folded lease from her bag, showing him the plans. Then she asked the question that had haunted her. "Did you buy that building for me?" Daniel studied her carefully before answering. "I bought it because Pilsen is being overtaken by luxury developments. Someone needed to preserve space for the community. Did I hope you might benefit? Yes. Did I do it to manipulate you into coming back? No." Joan believed him. It wasn't blind faith, it was trust earned through months apart, through watching him step back and let her lead her own life. She told him what she needed if they were to try again. Complete transparency, no financial entanglement with her business, respect for her autonomy even when his instinct was to fix and control. He told her what he needed: patience with his learning curve, honesty when she was afraid, permission to love her even when she found it terrifying. They didn't kiss or embrace. Instead, they stood together, talking for hours over the cold wind and the roar of the lake, slowly building a foundation from truth rather than passion. The new beginning was quieter than their explosive start. Coffee dates became the norm, where they spoke openly about boundaries, past mistakes, and aspirations. They integrated their worlds without one overwhelming the other. 6 months later, Joan opened the Amber Room in Pilsen. The bar drew attention not for its price tag, but for its craftsmanship. Daniel sat quietly at the bar during the opening, pride evident but restrained. Their relationship wasn't flawless. They argued, navigated cultural differences, and tested each other. But they had learned to fight fair, to repair, to choose each other repeatedly. A year after that November evening, Joan locked up on a Monday night to find Daniel waiting outside. They walked along the Chicago River, the city lights reflecting in the water. He didn't propose, didn't declare grand gestures. Instead, he shared that he had purchased a building near her bar, not for her, but to remain close to her world, to participate rather than dominate. Joan realized then that love was not about changing another person. It was about expanding together to make room for something new. Back in the bar, she slid a perfectly crafted cocktail across the counter. Daniel tasted it and smiled. "Still think you can handle me?" she asked. "I'm learning," he said. "Every day I'm learning." If this story touched your heart, subscribe and hit the notification bell. We share new powerful stories every day. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from, and if this story moved you, your likes and support help us keep bringing stories that matter. We'll see you in the next one.